Welcome to the JR Texan Consort. Get ready to enjoy this life here with JR Texan Consort. We begin now with October 4th. We will cover as much as we can of the story, as much as JR will allow me. Okay? October 4th, 1993, 3 a.m. JR had been up and down all night with stomach and emotional upset. He's disappointed with his father and upset with Brad and Jim Bob. Jim Bob's aunt took him back to Odessa. JR found out that Jim Bob Horton wanted to be a psychologist, researcher for criminal justice studies at Tall City College, established in 1809 by some LDS missionaries from Louisiana. From 1909. Its counterpart is Odessa University College and Lubbock University College. Last night, JR talked to Ken about a Bible study he was attending with Brad and Jim Bob and Karen on some Thursday evenings, and got a very chilly reception. JR had also learned yesterday the Cheesecake Toastmasters was changing its meeting to Tuesday night next semester. He knows the study room won't be open until 4 a.m. and the electronic key won't work until that time. So he goes downstairs to look to the dorm living room. True to form, Charlie Nation is passed out on the couch as Murphy Brown has just got off of Fox TV. And so he goes out to the fountain to pray and meditate. About 4:25 a.m. Eastern. In Miami, Kyle wakes up to complete his training. He has 2 more weeks before he can return to Texas. He has requested to return to recruiter school for the recruiter status for Midland, Odessa for a time, so he could get a chance to see Jim and Betsy off to Washington, D.C., should President Clinton give, quote-unquote, Daddy his appointment. 4 p.m. Central. JR goes into the main study lounge at Gordon Hall. He is relieved that Don, the on-campus RA, asked Charlie to return to his room. He begins studying for government class and statistics. JR learned last night that Spanish class was canceled today because George Hooper had to take his wife, English professor Dr. Hooper, to the doctor. Meanwhile, Jim and Claude are almost on the way to Denver City as they listen to Chris Ledoux and Gus Brooks. By 5:30 a.m., JR has breakfast with Kevin McDonald at TNC. JR, donuts, really? Kevin said. Man, you seem real down. I don't know, Gerald said. Donuts are a comfort to me. And maybe there's hope for me and Karen. If it weren't for Brad, I don't know. Brad. Man, I don't know. I don't see how a hottie like her could date a ferret like Brad. Agreed. Back in the 50s, Granddad Swain said he had to shoot at least 10 prairie dogs a year from bothering his cattle and goats. 8 a.m. In government class, Jack Fitzmiller was still out presenting an academic paper in Sacramento, California, with a chance to meet President Clinton before the president's departure for San Francisco. Frederick Mackay talked about the designers of the Texas Constitution. At 8:15 a.m., Mackay draws JR out of class. After class. JR, I need to talk to you. Yes, sir, JR said. Look, I hear you're thinking about going into public affairs. There's an appointment for you to see Dr. Andrew Harmon on the afternoon of the 5th of November. He's in NASCOM room 220. He'd be delighted to see you. 9:15 a.m. JR walks into the office of Isidro Sanchez. Sanchez is working on his master's degree and PhD, studying at Tech. He takes JR down to the lab where Belinda, the lab assistant, put him through some audio and written assignments for his class to prepare for the test. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Elizabeth instructs a foreman to slaughter 4 deer to take to the butcher. Her mother, meanwhile, is making lemonade. Today was the day she would go see Dr. Hood for radiation treatment and to see whether to resume chemotherapy. 10:50 a.m. Dave Smith pulls up in front of the foreign language building. Hey man, let's go, JR said, getting into the car. Good to see you, Dave. Dave Smith pulls his car out of the drive. Hey Dave, in high school, you were good at sports, weren't you? JR asked. Yeah. The Hogan Steers swim team won 3 gold medals, Dave said. Well, I won 2 gold medals in prep school with 1 bronze medal my sophomore year. See? Big Spring is a small town. And so getting a slot on the swim team was pretty easy. They drive to One Guy from Italy's Pizza for lunch. 11:55 a.m. In the car after lunch, JR and Dave continue their conversation from the restaurant. My parents, man, JR said. Man, they just don't get it with me. Daddy's busy promoting himself, and Mama's busy finding herself. Stop complaining, Dave said. You never had to live in Big Spring. I spent my first 8 years living in the city. in a townhouse with Mama and Daddy. When we moved to the ranch, I was happy for the most part. Then Daddy leaves the company in my hands for a year while he plays around in Washington, D.C. Be grateful your dad took a chance on you, Dave said. 1 p.m. Statistics class is being moved to the first floor of the math building due to some remodeling. Today, Stephanie Rogers is discussing confidence intervals and deviation from the normal curve. Because of Jim, they had arranged to bring in some tactile graphing. Meanwhile, in downtown Midland, Jim is getting ready for the possible shutdown of a rig in Eastland because it lacked the necessary employee safety precautions. 2:05 p.m. Brad meets JR outside the math building. JR, I'm sorry, Brad said. Jim-Bob was so ditzy. He wouldn't have come to your... Oh, I think I've already done this. Okay, moving right along. The next few days passed quietly. The morning of October 11th at 5:30 a.m. Central, JR wakes up and dresses. In an hour, he would be having breakfast at the University Center with Kevin McDonald. He still feels some of the rub from the relationship with Karen, and wonders within himself whether or not he should break up with her. JR planned to talk about this over breakfast with Kevin. 6:30 a.m. Central at the Crockett House Dining Hall. JR and Kevin talk over breakfast. Man, why do you torment yourself up with this girl? Drop her and get it over with, Kevin said. It may not look that bad, Kevin. But for the one time she was my princess. You was the operative. You was the operative word, Junior. Come on, man. You don't see what I see. Jennifer Bowers is crazy about you. She's crazy about you, and look at you. You're longing for a girl who is hanging out with a snob like Brad. I wouldn't go to the damn party hosted by him. When she's not with him,